We have become far too dependent on the convenience of large chains. Whether it's Amazon, which arrives at our doorstep the next day with a click of a button, to the HEB slash Publix slash Costco a couple miles down the road that we can pop into and buy anything we want anytime, even if it's out of season, we are wholly dependent on the convenience factor of mass production. I believe this is going to eventually blow up in our face. That's why I want to learn about the struggles and constraints small farmers deal with as they battle the red tape of big government and the day-to-day burden of labor and logistics. Today, I'm talking to John, a veteran of the 173rd Airborne who breaks down his day-to-day, the hurdles he's had to jump through to get to where he is, what he's seeing across the nation in the farming industry, and what can be done to strengthen our communities and our futures as we support local producers. Stay tuned. They know nothing about cause and effect.
We have a gentleman who is running our elections who literally came from a dictatorial South American communist country.
Stealing, trafficking, we've got to put a stop to it. John, welcome. How you doing today, brother?
Good. How are you, Sam? Thank you for having me.
I'm doing well. I'm struggling with the allergies out here. I don't know if it's a temperature thing or what, but something's kicking through Central Texas and it's just beating me up. So sorry if I'm nasally today.
No, not a problem. Not a problem. Happens to all of us. I think everybody across the country is getting sick with something at this point.
Yeah, for sure. No, I've been seeing it all over my friends' groups. So, but I'm glad I'm talking to you today. We talked a little bit before the show, and you are the exact demographic I want to talk to about farming. You are a farmer who cannot solely exist and make ends meet with the farming industry in and of itself. You have to do something else. And that's exactly who I want to talk to, because as I've been going around on the campaign trail with Doc and talking to other folks, I've been hearing a lot from farmers about a lot of the struggles and issues out there pertaining to big corporations, the cost of maintenance on equipment, the cost of land, just so many different issues. And I want to get it directly from a farmer, what you're saying, and then maybe get into some of the international aspect of, for instance, the CCP buying up Farmland, and get your take on that and what that looks like. And so with that said, tell us about yourself and what it is you do.
Sure. My name is John Leslie. I grew up in Northern Mass. When I went to college, got my degree, and then decided, hey, I want to jump out of airplanes and shoot guns for a living. So nice. I decided to enlist as an 11 Bravo, and then served with the 173rd for quite a bit of time with one rotation in Afghanistan. Got out. So I have a degree in engineering. So I got out, got a regular job, kind of lived in the suburbs for a while, and then moved to a rural part of New Hampshire where my wife and I started a small farm. And then recently in June, we moved down to Pennsylvania and got a little bit bigger acreage, a little bit better for producing and for farming. And we just moved onto the property in October. So we've really been building our infrastructure, getting all of our processes set, all that stuff. So we raise a small number of beef, lamb, pork, and meat birds, all on pasture, all rotationally grazed, regenerative ag style, kind of like Joel Salatin, if you know who he is.
No.
Yeah.
What is that? What is that? What does regenerative mean?
So regenerative means you're basically utilizing the animals in the way that they were designed in order to best improve your land, not run things down. The animals get to be the animals, and it makes your property and your land better over time rather than making it worse and degrading it.
Gotcha. And what does that actually look like on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, sure. So for us, we have, like I said, a small beef herd, small flock of lambs. So we move them either daily or every other day, depending upon the season and how the grass is growing. Then about a week later, we follow with broilers. So, meat chickens. And they basically take all the manure that the cows and the sheep have put down, stir it up, push it into the soil, and then kill any bacteria, any, pests that could infect the sheep and the cows later down the road. And then They also eat less feed because of that, so it reduces our feed bill, makes them healthier. There's actually a lot of studies showing the vitamin mineral content for pasture raised animals and rotationally grazed animals is considerably higher than stuff on, feedlots and all that.
Interesting. I'm not gonna lie, I'm sure that's secondhand information to most people. I've never heard of that. That's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Um, how much land are you on?
So we're on about 20 acres. Not
20
huge,
acres.
but
Okay.
we're enough where we make, like you said, we make some money, but we both have, my wife and I both have to work full-time regular jobs to make ends really meet.
Gotcha. And let me ask, how did you break into that? You might have already said, I apologize if you just said this, but did you
Nope.
buy the land? Was it gifted to you
Yes.
or
So we bought land. We first bought land in New Hampshire prior to COVID when land was not insane, and we managed to get a decent amount of acres there, and put a lot of work and effort into making it actually farming because New Hampshire's basically all woods. So we had to carve it into pasture over time. And then, you know, while working full time jobs and building out the ability to actually carry certain animals. So, like, at first, we could really only have like a cow or two and a couple lambs, and then improve the carrying capacity over time. So you don't roll into like this nice green pasture. Right now, what we bought was old, cornfields, and we're going to turn it into pasture over time. So we're going to be able to make it better. But it's all time and work.
okay, so you bought the 20 acres and then you've been steadily improving pockets of it over time. And is that what
Yep.
I'm understanding? Yeah, just building it out.
Yeah, so we just bought this 20 acres in June, like, so 6 months,
Oh,
7 months ago.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
so we're building out fencing right now. We built, a run-in for for the sheep and the cows. We built a run-in for the pigs, small chicken coop for, like, our own personal layers, stuff like that. So over time, we'll get better. We're gonna do buried water lines come spring, just to everything, infrastructure is the biggest cost besides land, really.
Yeah, and explain that. So two questions for you. What does a day-to-day look like for you when it comes to actually building that infrastructure out? Because I'm sure just mom and pop shop, it is extremely laborious and hard labor on you, in addition to working a 9 to 5 or whatever that schedule actually looks like. And then what are what am I trying to ask here? What is the give and take as far as income in versus output into your infrastructure so you can kind of balance it out and not stretch yourself too thin?
Right. So my regular job, thankfully, I'm home. I work remotely 3 out of 5 days a week, so I have to go in the office twice a week. So most of those days, where I'm in at the house, I'll get up early. I'll check the water. So I'll get up at about 5, check the waters. Then I go to the gym, get home. Just keep a half eye on the animals over the course of the day while I'm doing work calls, stuff like that. Then in the afternoon and evening, while we still have sun, because winter's tough, but I'll go out and, like, the other day I was working on improving our fencing for our winter section for the sheep and the cattle. So I spent like an hour and a half outside just hanging fences and tightening that stuff up. Then weekends is really where we get a lot of stuff done, right? Because it's the free time mostly. So I'll be able to put like 4, 5, 6 hours into a project at any given point. But most of the time, once the infrastructure is in place and stuff, most of my stuff is 2 hours of work a day on the farm stuff.
Okay.
Right now, we're definitely losing money this year. Like, all the money we're shelling out for infrastructure, we're not bringing anything in because we haven't been able to sell because of moving all of our equipment down from New Hampshire to Pennsylvania. We had to cut down on our flock size for the sheep. We had to cut down on our beef size. So really, this year's kind of a loss. Hopefully next year we'll be able to get the chicken broilers running, maybe sell a head of beef or two, a couple of lambs, but everything's kind of hit a reset for the next couple of years, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think I think for anybody watching this, that's the meat and potatoes of what they want to know. How does somebody break into this world yet experience what you're experiencing with the amount of work that you've put in, with the amount of investment you've put in financially, and yet you're still taking a loss, which is not uncommon for any small business owner. you're going to put in for a couple years, especially let's say you ran a restaurant. You're going to put in for years until you collect a paycheck on that, and you're just trying to make ends meet. So that's understood in the business world. But what what are those limitations, and what makes it? Let me just ask you, what has made it hard for you? And then, as a farmer in general, what are some of the constraints that prevent more folks from doing this? And the reason why I ask, not just for everybody else's benefit, because they want to know, like, hey, I'm thinking about starting a farm and I want to do this. But like I said, I've talked to so many farmers and I hear about all of these constraints they have, and and they bring their ideas to the table as far as how the government can incentivize more small farmers doing what they do, so we have more access to farm fresh to table produce. But it's not worth it to so many people, and the corporations went out in the end. So what limitation, like I said, what limitations have you experienced, and then what are you seeing overall?
Yeah, absolutely. So one major limitation that we have as small farmers is access to processing, especially for livestock, right? So when we were in New Hampshire, there was no USDA chicken processing facilities within the entire state. So in order to sell
Wow.
direct to consumers, we had to drive. New Hampshire's not a huge state, but we had to drive about 3.5 hours to Vermont, drop off the chickens one day, pick them up the next day. So that's what, 7 hours in a car,
Yeah.
back to back days, in order just to get chickens processed. Um, Another major hurdle that I know a lot of farmers have, obviously, is access to land, which is going to be something that's difficult, and it's going to be a major concern moving forward, because approximately, I want to say 75% of farmers are over the age of 60 right now. And so
That's not
as we
good.
move into, that, the next 10 to 15 years, there's going to have to be a massive transfer of land, of processes. And people our age, they don't want to farm. I'm busting my butt before the sun's up. I get home, I'm working
Right.
afterwards, and I'm making what, like, our we'll make a couple bucks per chicken that we process. My labor is basically free. I do it because it's nice to go outside. I enjoy it. I like working with the animals. But if I were to try and make a living on this, it'd be tough, especially with, like, just the cost of infrastructure right now, the cost of land, buying a house, just how much it's skyrocketed in the last 6 years is just intense.
What has uh, I'm asking this out of ignorance, so you got to
Mhm.
bear with me as I kind of fumble through these questions, because I just don't know what is and what isn't. But what, if any, accessions has Congress, or maybe even the White House, promised, or anything else? Are there any bills out there that are trying to improve your position as a small farmer, or
So,
what have they taken away from you?
okay. So I'll run through how, farms can do direct to consumer sales. And then I'll talk about what different states have tried to do and what's going on at the national level. So, in order to sell directly to a consumer, there's three ways, right? So, there's what's called the custom cut exemption. So, you can sell a whole cow, whole pig, half pig, like a huge chunk of animal, to a consumer directly with at a custom processor. These custom processors aren't inspected by either the state or the federal government, but they do offer this. It's great for small farms. I can call up a custom processor like a month or two ahead of time and say, hey, I've got like 2 cows coming. Can you fit them in? And then I'll do direct consumer sales that way. You also have some states that have a state inspected program. The state inspected program is the exact same as the federal inspected program, but it's just administered by the state. So it's not really any easier. It's just the states are able to kind of administer it rather than at the federal level. So the big normal processing is what's called USDA processing. So USDA processing has a federal employee on the slaughter floor all the time. So basically, the processor is paying this USDA inspector's salary 20 the whole time they're doing this work. There's minimal number per state, and the investment to get a USDA processing facility off the ground is anywhere from $5 to $8 million to get a decent sized one going. The issue ends up being when we have these huge processing facilities. Like, if you look at the top 10 processors top 10 processing facilities nationally for beef that processes annually about 40 to 50% of the beef head that are processed in the country. We have processors for chicken. Like Costco has a processor that they contract with that is approximately 40% of their chicken. These huge conglomerations of siloed organizations make it really tough for small companies to break in. And then you're bearing that overhead cost, whereas like a company like Costco can spread it across all these different, things. So then Congress, some states have tried to do bills where basically they're allowing custom cut processing. So the custom cut can only be sold by the heifer whole. You can't sell, like, if I did a custom cut, you lived across the street from me, and you're like, hey, John, can I buy a steak? Just a single steak. I couldn't do it legally. So there's some states, New Hampshire specifically, some of the ones up in the northern Midwest have tried to pass bills that are saying, hey, if they're animals raised in the state, processed in the state, we can sell it however. Unfortunately, there's been a couple of Supreme Court actions back in the 30s that led to the issues where that technically is not legal. So even if the state says this is all just within our state and the federal government doesn't touch it, Supreme Court's going to throw it out likely. So what's going on at the federal level is Congressman Massey, for the past 6 or 7 sessions of Congress, has proposed what's called the Prime Act, which is essentially what that's doing. It's allowing the custom cut processors within the state to process animals that are born and raised in the state that are allowed to be sold to restaurants, like supermarkets, direct to consumer.
Makes sense.
Within the state. So you don't cross state boundaries. It's basically just allowing that to happen.
Okay.
And that doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't make it out of committee every year.
Really? Why? No. Okay.
So I would assume lobbyists, but hard to tell.
likely, and that's usually what happens. And I'm curious how much of the Massey hate from the Trump administration is affecting that. Although you said last 6 or 7 years, so that would be multiple administrations. No, but that's a common sense bill in my opinion. And we are, once again, as is everything in this country, it sounds like we're over legislating and red taping ourselves into to our own demise. So I'd be curious to hear more arguments about that, but we won't explore that right now. But what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is your primary constraint, just in terms of food production, is processing.
That is the largest constraint nationally for small farms, particularly. Yeah.
Interesting. That's not something that I would have. I mean, it makes sense when I think about the problem set, but I wouldn't have pegged that as the issue. I would have pegged all of the logistics on your end alone, as far as acquiring the animals, feeding the animals, caring for the animals, the infrastructure of building everything. It wouldn't be actually, okay, I've done all the work already. Now I just need to get the animal into shop and get it taken care of and out to people. And not only are you locked down by, like you said, okay, so I'm just re-breaking for myself. I'm not doing this to insult anybody. If you're following along, you're paying attention well, then congratulations. But I'm trying to understand this for myself. You have these FDA employees that are being paid, their entire salary is being paid by the I just had a brain fart. The processor, sorry.
The facilities. Yep.
Yeah, the facility. And ultimately, when you have those kind of costs incurred, that's going to end up coming back on you, and you're going to have to pay more because you're helping pay somebody's salary. Whereas these large corporations can spread that out over, I mean, mega stores, mega anything is going to be able to spread their costs out. And for instance, theft at Walmart is in the billions and they barely even flinch, versus theft at your local mom and pop market. They lose a few $100s and that really hurts. So it's the same concept for you. You're getting whacked with these overhead costs versus them. They're like, we don't care. We write that into our tax write-off. It's nothing for us.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the other thing to really think about is you have a small facility that processes a couple of head of cattle a day, maybe 10, compared to a facility that processes a couple thousand, and the number of USDA employees that have to be on the floor is about the same. So you think,
Really?
yeah, yep.
They don't scale it at all. It's just one size fits all.
As far as I understand it, and I might be wrong here, no.
That's something I'm definitely gonna look up, because not saying you're wrong, but I want to verify that's true, because that pisses me off.
Yeah.
That sounds like an intentional bottleneck to screw the little guys over. I mean,
Is it intentional? I don't know, but it's
or is
just
it
the
just
fact
negligence?
that it's just red tape, right? So, you have the increased size of government. They can't really be flexible. Government's never flexible. So you build up red tape, and it's always just in this hard line.
Yeah. Huh. So okay, let me pivot into another question, and this is throughout this interview. I'm just going to pepper in some of these questions I got from X, and I'm just going to tell everybody, disclaimer: I don't endorse these or condemn them or anything else. So if you hear something goofy in there, or you see me smile about something, just go with it.
That'll work.
Let me find the one that directly pertains to what I'm talking about now. I'm not seeing it. I'm just going to ask the question then, because I thought there was one of these questions here. So let me ask your opinion about CCP, China. Let me ask your opinion on China buying up all this farmland all over the U.S. Give me your take.
So first, China buying the farmland is a huge issue. Then we have to look at foreign ownership of the major processors, right? So China's buying up farmland. A lot of it conveniently is around military bases, which, who knows what that's for, whether it's
conveniently, right?
Intel Intercept or whatever. Then you have to look at, all right, so Smithfield, the largest pork producer in the country, is owned by a Chinese corporation. So that's roughly 20% of our annual pork production is owned by China. Then if we're looking at other foreign companies that are involved in the U.S. livestock industry, we have National Beef and JBS, which are two of the largest beef producers that are both owned by Brazil, which is, notionally an ally. It's also a BRICS member.
Right.
And they also own Pilgrim's Pride, which is about 20% of the chicken production in the nation. So we have to look at this foreign holding of both the processing and the farmland. Now, the farmland is important, but the processing could really be a bottleneck if they decide to say, shut down just all the Smithfield production. And those and the pigs are actually owned by Smithfield. So like you think, oh, this farmer owns, you drive past like a chicken house, right? So you see these 10,000 chickens in this chicken house. You think, oh, the farmer owns 10,000 chickens. No, the farmer is contracted labor to raise these animals for these major corporations. So the farmer could get stuck holding the bag if they cancel the contract mid processing. They could just come pull the chickens and the farmer's SOL.
Yeah, and I'm looking up. I'm just Googling really quick. I'm not doing any kind of deep dive on this, but I just looked up how much farmland does China own in the U.S. It says they own a small fraction, which that's Google. They're always going to be biased towards the left on that, but around 277,384,000 acres as of recent reports, which is less than 1% of total foreign held land. Says figures vary slightly by year, but what I have noticed, and I think the big takeaway here is like you said, the fact that they buy up all this farmland around military installations, and you're like, huh, interesting location. Why would you do that?
Not like there's anything in, say North Dakota, South Dakota that's of importance, like ICBM fields or anything like that.
Right.
Then the other side we're looking at is you look at people like Bill Gates, who owns more land than the state of Rhode Island.
Thank you for bringing that up.
As he wants to sell, our the lab grown meat, he buys up ranch lands all over the place.
Yeah. Explore that one. Explain that. I'm well aware of this topic, but explain that for the audience.
So, as we know, lab-grown meat has become this huge thing over the last couple of years. It's growing as a percentage of sales slowly. But Bill Gates, several other multi-billionaires have bought up gigantic ranches, especially in Wyoming, Montana. Montana actually is one of the richest states in the country now because of just the sheer number of billionaires buying up land,
Mm.
and just sitting on it. Some of them are producing meat, some of them aren't. But the USDA pays people to not produce things on their land because of
Yeah, it's
driving
been
price
going on for
down.
decades, if
Yes,
I'm
it
correct,
has.
right? Yeah, okay.
Yep. Yep. So these guys are using our own rules, getting taxpayer money to just not grow things, which then drives up the cost of food for everybody else.
Yeah. And then let's talk. I want to explore that more with Bill Gates. So he has this desire. Like I have my opinions, but I'll keep my opinion out of this one. He has this desire to have everybody eating artificial meat, and so he buys up the land. You can't say 1 and 1 equals 2 on this, but I'm pretty certain it does. There's an effort to force people out of production, in my opinion. I said I wasn't going to give my opinion. I am going to give my opinion. But there's an effort to force people out of production and then do this thing. Why? Why would we be pushing people to artificial meat? Is this a climate change thing? What is his reasoning for this?
They claim it's climate change. I mean, if you raise cattle similar to ours, it actually sequesters more carbon than it produces. That the argument against red beef is consistently that it's the largest carbon producer in the world from a agricultural standpoint. They always say, "Oh, well, beef. You eat beef, and it has so much carbon impact on the nation." But if you raise it correctly, where you rotate it, where you are able to actually treat them the way they used to be, like the huge herds of buffalo that used to roam the Midwest, that used to trample the ground, then it would
Sure.
move.
Great
Yeah.
example.
So that's the climate change argument. Is it also a modicum of control? Probably. I mean,
Yep.
if you wanted to control people, you have the production centralized in certain areas that can be shut off or turned on when you want them to. At least that's my thought.
No, I think that's pretty valid. I'd concur. Okay. Let me let me ask this. We've already kind of answered this, but this was somebody's specific question. So
Mhm.
said if farmer is a beef producer, which you are, small numbers, but you are, ask what they think will take for producers to retain heifers to build up U.S. inventory if market prices remain high. They said in parentheses, which they likely will if Mexican import remains closed.
Yeah, so I mean that's a real question for larger beef farmers than myself, right? I'm always going to keep heifers if I'm trying to grow my herd out. The issue ends up being with larger producers where they can make more money by selling off heifers than they can by raising them and producing more cows down the road.
Why is that?
The other thing what was that?
Why is that?
So basically, the heifer at the time you sell it for X number of dollars per pound. It takes 18 months to raise a heifer to produce. Then there's 9 months of pregnancy. So it takes about 2 years really till you get your first calf on the ground from a heifer.
Okay.
At that point, you've invested a certain amount of money. The market may drop. You have to pay that money out yourself. So it's more overhead costs that you're carrying. And if something were to happen, then it's a loss.
Yeah.
The other issue is as farmers get older, they're less able to care for the number of animals that they care for. So that's the reduction in the beef herd as well. You're getting more stressed out. You're in your mid 60s. You're looking at retiring. You sell a bunch of your herd off to get a big, windfall to be able to say just retire and just hang on that money and just not have to go out every day, throwing hay, checking the
Yep.
animals, all that stuff. So it's a double-edged sword because it'll continue to drive beef prices up, but while the beef prices are high, you want to sell what you got. If the beef prices collapse, then you're SOL, especially at auction. If you're direct to consumer sales, you can kind of loop around that by keeping the sales price high. But people always be like, well, I can go to Costco and buy this rack of ribs for $10 as opposed to where I have to charge like $5 a pound minimum.
Yeah.
So it's just, you're
No, that's
competing
valid.
against these large producers as well.
Let's say that the U.S. government wasn't evil and egomaniacal and run by despots. A little bit of humor there, but still, let's say that that isn't the case, and they did want to incentivize folks like you, the small producers. Do you have any recommendations of what they could do right now in that regard?
So I think Pass the Prime Act would help.
Massey's bill.
Yeah, Massey's bill,
Okay.
in order to allow, more avenues for sales for small producers. They could also, honestly, it's tough, right? Like, because incentivizing stuff at the federal level doesn't really work, right?
No,
We've
it
seen
doesn't.
this in the past. So it's get out of the way. We'll fix it. Make it easier to sell stuff. Make it easier to do stuff. Just cut the red tape. Really, there's no incentivizing unless some sort of grant system, but
But
then it'll
why
just
would
be
they? Yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
And that's kind of what I was joking about, because if obviously right now the incentive and the effort goes into big production, it goes into feeding the entire herd versus just the small pockets of herd across the United States. So what are they going to invest in? They're going to invest in the big boys. And I think that's why you have issues like these this FDA oversight, or I'm sorry, USDA oversight on the floors and in the lack. Why do you have to pay the same numbers as Tyson Chicken for? So all of it is meant to hinder you, and why would they? But if they were feeling benevolent, I'm just curious what they could do. But I agree with that. Cut the red tape, just as anything else. Get out of the way. Let
exactly.
people exist, and that should be our policy on just about anything. Get out of the way.
100% agreed.
Defend the nation. Do your job from a federal perspective, and then get out of our way and just let us live. So that kind of leads me to, I should have asked this at the very beginning, but I am curious about something, and I'll probably clip this because I think people will be interested. But you join the Army, you're an 11 Bravo, you're an infantryman at, you're in the 173rd. And for people who don't know the 173rd, they're based out of Italy. They are kind of the, I'll just say lone wolf airborne brigade that kind of stands on their own, but a very storied legacy, very proud organization that I would say keeps business tight, in line with the 82nd Airborne and in line with Ranger Regiment and in line with those guys, just very proud of their legacy and very proud of what they do. At what point did you say, maybe it even wasn't in the Army, but at what point did you start thinking like, I want to own some land, maybe I want to do some animals or something? And then to jump on to that question, how can one start as a farmer in today's economy when land is so expensive?
Right. So I didn't really, I grew up in the suburbs. I'd never had a chicken. I never had a pig when I was a kid. I had no interest in it. I was a math nerd who played a bunch of sports, right? So that was never anything, even in my ballpark of ideas. And even in the Army, no, no interest. It wasn't something I had ever thought about. I started listening to a couple, podcasts on stuff, started growing a garden. And I was kind of like, oh, this is kind of cool. I could, and looking into it. And I was like, oh, it'd be really cool to raise our animals, be able to say, oh, I know where my meat comes from, instead of maybe it's from, the Midwest. Maybe it's from somewhere in the Southwest. I have no idea how this meat was treated, how the animal lived, died, anything. So my thought process was initially looking at my own stuff, what I took in and my family. And then we eventually would slowly grew to the point where we were supplying local families chicken and beef and lamb regularly. So to get into farming, right, you don't need a lot of land to do small things for yourself, right? So like a broiler chicken, you can raise it on your lawn in 8 to 9 weeks.
Hmm.
So you have 2 weeks where it's, in like a little stock tank in, say, a shed with a heat lamp. Then you put it out on your lawn. You do what's called a chicken tractor, which is like a small footprint thing that protects it from your predation. They're raised in there for till about 8 weeks. Then you can either process them depending upon your numbers, or you find a local processor that'll do it, because it's just for your family, so you don't have to really follow any of the state or federal regulations.
Hmm.
And that's, you can get your chicken like organically raised pasture raised, super healthy for $3 a pound, including processing fees, but then you start tacking on your labor and stuff like that. So what I did was we raised one chicken tractor, which is about 30 birds, 3 times our first summer. And then we gradually added more chicken tractors every year till we were starting to sell to, families around the neighborhood, friends. We'd say, hey, who wants to buy some chicken? And then we just expanded over time and just rolled our profits back into building out our infrastructure, building out our herd. And then we got to the point where we're like, okay, let's add pork. So then we got a couple feeder pigs from a friend who raised pigs, raised them. We raised 4 of them our first season, kept one for ourselves, sold 3 to, just friends for $500-$600. That covered our entire costs and then some of our infrastructure. You just build it out over time. But to supply your own family with some eggs, some chicken, some veggies, you can do that on small acreage. There's a lot of books and podcasts out there that tell you, and YouTube channels even, that'll show you how to do it. And it's not hard to do your own stuff. Once you start in supplying for other people, then it's a little bit more.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I have quite a few friends who do the chicken thing, and I'm technically in an unincorporated area, so I could do it myself, but I'm limited because I have which until I was 40 years old, I didn't even know this existed, but I have the septic, what do they call that? The pop-ups that spray out, you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah. You're
yes.
the lawn
Yeah.
heads. Yep.
There's a name for it, but yeah, basically, if people don't know, because I didn't know for 40 years, there's a septic that it sprays treated water, and the treated water just runs through the bleach in your system, but it goes through several heads, and it sprays poop water on your yard. And people get pissed when I say poop water. That's not poop water; it's treated. But I'm like, it's nasty, dude. I don't want to. So,
what's it treated with? Poop.
Exactly. So it's one of those things where I would love to have chickens, but it's not really an option at the moment until I can get that fixed, and that's an expensive endeavor. So, anyways, yeah. No, that's good to know. And I as is anything else, I think we have I want it now, I want it overnight society. And farming is very difficult to think of in that regard because it is a very laborious endeavor, and you've got to do it over time. Just as my parents worked hard for years to save up enough to buy a house, and then you eat things like Spam and bologna, and you do what you got to do, powdered milk and concentrate juice and all the things I grew up on because we were poor. I didn't know I was poor, but it's the same concept. You do things a little bit over time, and you add on.
Exactly. And it's also a skill set, right? Like you look at raising a chicken is different than raising a lamb, which is different than raising a pig. So we tried to add, one animal a year so we can figure out how do we do this? My wife grew up in a small farming town, but her family didn't farm. So she knows people who did, so we can always ask them questions. But both of us are just learning as we go. So it's always just new skills and just seeing it, seeing how things go and making changes as we kind of work through processes and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. Kind of an odd one to me, but somebody said, curious to hear if South Africans are showing up to the small farm looking for work. Did an episode with a farmer from Kansas, and they mentioned they were seeing a number of farmers from South Africa. So you're not big enough for South Africans. But let's expand the question and say, in your sphere of farming buddies or whatever, and the people what are you seeing as far as foreign labor showing up looking for work?
So interestingly, when we were looking at property, that was one of the things that people in Pennsylvania had been hearing was that South Africans, there was a bunch that were going to be coming to Pennsylvania and buying up farmland, whether it's, from stuff they sold or however they would have afforded it. So it's something that could be there. I haven't heard of people actually, coming onto the property. We're in Amish country, so so most of the people around that we know that do farming are either, you've got the row crop farmers or you've got the Amish. And row crop farmers really don't have, hands, and Amish use their kids. So,
yeah,
sure. The labor for the foreign labor market around here is not huge, but I'm sure in other places, especially, veg or Texas or these big, ranches. They're probably more there.
I'm curious about this, and maybe you know the answer to this, but going back to the South African thing, obviously South African is both white and black, and a lot of those South African farmers were white, and they were basically the government took their land from them in some sort of diversity, pay it back to the blacks type of thing. It's a long story. A lot of horrible atrocities were committed against white farmers, but anyways, and we know that Elon Musk is South African. There you go. But anyways, is is that is that what you're seeing, or is that what you're hearing, that white South African farmers who are displaced are coming over, or do you not know?
That's the rumor. I mean, that was partially what the President Trump had helped push for last spring. I think it
Okay.
was sometime in the springtime. He was bringing a bunch of South African white farming families over that have been displaced. I don't know how much follow through there was because it was on the news for 5 minutes and then we moved to the next issue
Yeah.
or concern or whatever because we have the bandwidth of 2-year-olds.
Yeah. Right. Um, I I get beat up for it constantly. Obviously, I did that show last year, and people were like, What's going on with this? We forgot about it instantly." And I'm like, "It's not a conspiracy. People just forget about things in 72 hours, and that's how fast our news cycle moves. Not that people don't care. It's just that people don't care. Like as you don't care. You're on to the next thing, and you're chasing the next ridiculous story that comes across the airwave. But yeah, anyways, let me ask you this one:
Yep.
mRNA shots in livestock. Do you use them, or have you heard about them?
There are vaccines. We don't vaccinate our animals. Some places they do. It's not necessarily mandatory. The mRNA vaccines, from what I understand, I don't look into it that much, are coming down the pipe. I don't know if they're here yet, but it's not something we pay attention to. We're small enough where we can kind of just hang out and we don't get that pressure from larger orgs do.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you. I don't like it. Uh, just everything. Look. Let me go into my little mRNA tangent really quick. But we know that there was 3 decades of trials on animals that all failed. All the animals died, and then they moved it into human trials, and then we saw what they did in the military and everything else. Myself, I was vaccine injured. I had the mRNA shot, and I didn't take it under mandate. I took it because, like a jackass, everybody else in the army was taking it, and I took it, and it's just what you do. You take your shots, and I didn't even think about it. And uh, I don't have regrets because regret is a stupid thing. But at the same time, I got shingles from it. I know what it did to me. I know what it did to a lot of my friends. I know the data behind it, and I don't like the fact that mRNA is being introduced as a vaccine to put into animals. And I know that right now they have mRNA shots as vaccines for dogs, for instance, and I don't like that because I don't want to take my dog to the vet and get an mRNA vaccine in them. And then, look, call me a conspiracy theorist, but all the shedding and everything else, I mean, I don't want that around my family. So yeah, it does concern me because at some point you're going to have to be asking these questions as this continues to mature. Where did my meat come from? Which kind of we should be asking anyways, but we've been living in la la land for decades and just, oh, my meat came from HEB. No, no, no. Where did it come from? Where did HEB, where did Walmart, where did Publix get their meat? Where did it come from? So we're gonna have to start asking those questions. And that's why I'm so interested in folks like you, because you are the farm to table folks who are going to give me meat. And I know, like when I grew up in Colorado, we had a family and we got a half a side of beef from them every year. We'd fill our freezer. We knew exactly what was being done to that beef. I mean, we would go out to their little farm, little thing like yours, not just a few acres,
Yeah.
and I saw a cow. And then 2 months later, I'm like, oh, I'm eating that cow. But I knew exactly how that cow lived, what went into it, and everything else. And that's how I want to continue to live. And also when we talk about contingencies and any kind of cataclysm that may come in the future, as far as uh, grid down or use your imagination, whatever kind of zombie apocalypse is going to happen, I would like access to production like yours so that
Yeah.
I'm not relying on interstate transfer with warlords controlling the the logistics production, and
Right.
it's
Yeah. So interestingly, you touch on the direct farm to table sales. Only roughly, right? So my farm might not count in this. Other small farms might not, but only about 6% of U.S. farms actually do direct to consumer sales. It's really only about 3% of annual farm sales, not just livestock. Fruit, veg, livestock. That's about 3% of our market, and that's it.
that's just not okay, man. It this goes into what I continually talk about as far as getting involved at your local level, and this is an aspect of it. And we need to support folks like you. And I don't even know how we overcome that constraint besides passing the what did you call it? Did you call it
The
the
Prime
Save
Act.
Act? Prime Act,
Prime.
excuse me.
Yep.
I got to get that in my lexicon. Prime Act. But besides something happening in Congress, I don't know how we change this issue, because like you said, it takes $5 to $8 million to get into dude, why am I struggling with that word?
USDA processing.
Processing.
Yeah.
It's an easy one, but I'll get it. It takes $5 to $8 million to get into to get into processing to start something up, but then you have to. I think about all the constraints in the second and third order effects after that of developing your network of people that are going to come in and use you, because you have to start turning over profit very quickly if you're a processor, a small processor. And what is the incentive for you? What it's always one of those things where you talk about a lot of people don't want to do this because it's hard work. There's no money in it. And why? Why do you do it? Well, your incentive is because you like to get outdoors and that's something you enjoy. Well,
Exactly.
we need to find more ways to incentivize that. And my take on it is community that is sharing in goods and doing things and trading locally should be our incentive and should be our something that we are moving to do on a daily basis. We should be moving to support, go do the research, go find the people that are producing, ask them what they need to be successful in their area. What once again, I'm kind of blockaded by the processing issue. Something I'm going to put some thought into.
Yeah, absolutely. So
It's
one
an
thing
issue.
too, if you buy from a local farmer, roughly 75 cents on the dollar that you spend stays in your local area, as opposed to you go to your local HEB, Costco, Walmart, whatever. Who knows where that money's going? It's going to big corporations somewhere else. It's not staying in your local community. It's not recycling over and over and over again to help drive your local economy.
Yeah.
So one thing that people can do is buy local. If I had an easier way to sell, and it's not hard, you're going to have to spend a little bit more. But if you came up to local farms, you met your local farmer and you said, "Hey, I want to buy a beef." That would help because you understand, okay, I've got this much market capacity, so I can produce more. So it makes it easier. You have less stress of, oh, I have to find somewhere to sell this cow because, there's a certain timeline where you can process them before they're either too old or, too big. So you have this set timeline. So I always try to sell stuff in advance, but you can't always. So it's, go find your farm, talk to the farmer, meet people, keep it local.
Absolutely. In fact, it just triggered my brain. 2 days ago, I bought $500 worth of beef and chicken from this guy comes around. These two guys come around and they have a marked van. It's going to sound super sketchy, but stick with me. It gets less sketchy. They have a van that has their logo on it and everything, like fully sighted, and it's a local producer, and you can look them up. You can find where everything is sourced from, but I've never bought from them before. And they've got some really energetic young guys who are just, they're not taking no for an answer. So I ended up buying 500. It was really good meat. We got chicken. I think we got some salmon as well. I don't know where they get that from, but my wife likes seafood,
Texas.
so yeah. but my wife likes that, so we got that. But anyways, the chicken and the beef, they produce the beef themselves. In fact, he was telling me anyways, I haven't actually looked this up, but they have it processed um, on site as well. So I don't know what kind. I'm going to look now because now that you say that, I'm curious. How are they processing their own beef?
So
But then
there
they.
are some farms that have their own on-site processors. So
Oh,
like
really? Okay.
so they do a lot. Some of the larger farms have vertical integration like that. Yeah. There's not a lot of them, but down in Texas is probably more likely than say, up in New England or Pennsylvania or
Yeah.
someplace like that.
And do they have the same requirements as far as USDA
Yep.
oversight? Okay.
They do. Yeah. So, I mean, there's quite a few co-ops coming on board now. So that's one way farmers are doing it. So they're doing a co-op to build out production processing facilities. So that way they're spreading both the initial spend, and then they're also spreading out the risk of, all right, we've got these 10 farms that are part owners of this processing facility. So they have all their processing lined up in the future. And that's a great way to go about it if you're that big. But if you're someplace like, a large homestead, small farm, you can't do that. You just got to
Yeah.
deal with what's there.
Hmm. Well, anyways, I'm glad I bought that food now that we're having this conversation. I feel like I'm doing my part for America. But that's something I'm gonna. I told him, in fact, I said I gave him the next time to come back around because I'm gonna keep buying from him because I was like, why not? When it comes to convenience, my only excuse for going to the grocery store is it's convenient. I think that's everybody's excuse. But if somebody's driving around my neighborhood, that's even more convenient. So invest in that guy because he's doing something local and it keeps the money local. Um,
Yep.
hmm, that gives me some homework. But anyways, okay. So going back into these questions, what policies, prices, tariffs need to change to get young people, especially vets, involved in American farming? Just less.
So less red tape. I
Yeah.
mean, the other issue, right, from young people is how many people are disconnected from where their food comes from. Like I grew up, like I said, in the suburbs. I had no idea where my chicken came from or my beef or anything like that. So being able to increase, understanding of where this is coming from, there's been a back to the land kind of movement going on the last, say, 6, 7 years. Really, since
Hmm.
COVID, it's kind of exploded. And that's great. It's awesome. But it needs to continue. There was one in the 70s and that petered out after a couple of years. Now this might be better because it's more family based, but we just got to keep growing. We got to keep our kids learning about it and keep them interested. And honestly, if you can make more money on it, then you're more likely to do it, like just
Right.
anything, right? So, being able to increase these sales, being able to, for people not to argue when you're saying, "Oh, my price is my price." Like, how many times do you get, like, as farmers, if you're doing direct consumer sales, they're like, "Oh, I'll pay you $4 a pound instead of the five that you." No, you don't go into a grocery store haggling. It's not like you
Right.
go up to the checkout counter like, I'm going to give you $3.50 because I see a black spot on that steak right there.
Right.
No, well, we our prices are set because we need that money, and if you knock it down, it's less money in my pocket. It's not like it's going to some Walmart where they're losing $500. It's I have less money to feed my family or pay for hay or build fence or whatever. So my prices are unnaturally high because we also don't have that huge stock of animals behind us.
Mhm.
We're raising a couple hundred chickens a year, we're raising a couple cattle. It's not that, we're raising 5,000 cattle. So we can price it off, and take those losses.
Yeah, we're not haggling over a coffee table on Facebook Marketplace. This is
Exactly.
this is set. So I hope people I hope some folks listen to that and take away from that. And this is how we support local. Support your local farmer. Don't haggle with them. There's a price there for a reason. And if they're outrageous, then just don't go to them. Go find another local farmer. But there's probably a pretty good reason for the prices they have. And go invest a little bit more money. It's worth it. It is worth it in investing in your local community. I'm going to ask you this last question, and this is my favorite, and I'll try not to smile. But anyways, can you ask why chemtrails are being allowed to be sprayed all over our land, and for what purpose? John, tell me, why
Oh,
are they spraying
jeez.
chemtrails on us?
I mean, you know, it's the government. They just don't like us.
That's a
I
good
really
answer.
don't know. I mean, that's way above anybody's pay grade, right? Like,
Right, right.
you, yeah, I got nothing. I got no way to really validate that.
Well, I'm gonna hit you up in a week after you do some research on that and answer everybody's question. Why are chemtrails and why are they spraying them on us? Because and John the farmer, he's got the answers, and he better have the answers. And
I will dig that up for you. I'll get back to you.
okay, well, um, I'm actually going to go back through and I'm going to listen to this podcast when we get done because I I am I learned a few things here, and I have some thoughts, and I can't really think them out while we're talking and having a conversation and trying to carry this. But there's some thoughts to be put into what does our future look like? How do we support local? How do we support efforts within our own community? And how do we support our local farmers? If we look at the basic needs of humanity, we need food, water, shelter, primarily, and then we get into all the other stuff. But you are one of the main components of what we need to survive, and yet we've blindly been just carrying on with mass agriculture. We'll just call it that. Once upon a time, humanity discovered agriculture, and then we got out of day to day subsistence, and we learned how to store and all these other things. Well, now we are on a whole different level of mass agriculture, where we just pop into a brick and mortar, grab stuff off a shelf without any thought as to what's happening there. And someday, I truly believe that is going to blow up in our faces.
I
And when,
completely agree.
yeah,
Yeah, just in time processing, there's times where it doesn't work. And the other way you can look at it, right, you're going to be spending more for local food, but look at it as an investment in your health too, because you're buying better quality food rather than going later to spend money at the doctor for some sort of issue that you've got because you're eating the crap from the shelves that doesn't go bad in, 60 days. It's just sitting in your fridge and it's still good. Go buy local, you'll spend a little bit more, you'll keep money in your community, and you'll improve your own health as well.
that's it. That's the final word. All right, John. We'll wrap it up with that. But thank you for your time. I learned a lot. I hope other people learn a lot. This has been very enlightening.
Awesome.
Um,
Thanks, Sam.
yeah. Good luck with your livestock.
Thank
All right,
you.
brother. All
All
right.
right.
See y'all next time.